Hello, government seekers. I'm floating. I'm floating. I'm actually floating because I'm in a hotel room. And we'll show you in a second when Lee comes on the show what's behind me. I'm having another supplement episode. Are you guys ready for Government Secrets episode 134 with the two most censored comedians in the world, Lee Cap and Graham Elwood?
Hey, man.
What's up, buddy?
I was going to say, if you're floating because you still haven't bought tax, that was going to be a problem. I was going to have an issue.
Well, the tax gate has been solved thanks to a fan. I went to my P.O. box last week and I got this. I was like, what is this? And I shook it and it was like making a sound. I was like, oh, these are tax.
Someone went to the trouble of mailing across the country something that they probably sell on your block where you live.
And it's an assortment of different colors and sizes.
Oh,
and
my God.
It's fantastic.
That's amazing. Whoever did that, God bless you.
God bless everything you're doing. I'll just show you what's happening. I've been in the middle of moving. My new place isn't ready yet. So I'm in a hotel room and there's a bunch of supplements.
Of course there is.
So I figured.
Maybe if you face the label of that forward and you just started advertising products, even if they hadn't made a deal with you, maybe then they'd make a deal. So you just started, look over my shoulder.
Hey, if you look over my shoulder, there's some vegan protein powder. But I thought I should probably just go with a virtual background that best fits this show.
Yes. There we go. Now we're
talking.
I feel like now everyone's going to think that we are the U.S. government. It just looks so real.
Well, you and I are as efficient as the United States government.
That's absolutely true. And we lie 100% less.
No, we do lie 100% less. We also don't make nearly as much money as they do. That's unfortunate.
I don't know. I feel like even make money is a bit of a euphemism. We don't steal as much money.
Well, we don't steal any money.
We don't steal any money, but they don't. The idea that they make money, the idea that they earn, it's kind of like when they always say that he got into, like in the eulogies and everything, he got into he was in public service for 60 years. Yeah. I love that enriching yourself by fucking everyone over is called public service.
Yeah, it's like that line in Mad Men that's like, philanthropy is the gateway to power. Like that was said to when John Draper was like coming up the ladder and he was asked to be a part of some philanthropic group. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And the old guy, Bert, was like, philanthropy is the gateway to power. And I was like, oh, God.
See, I thought that was reversed. I thought philanthropy was what those in power pretend to do to act as if they give a shit about humanity.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it's a tax write-off. And then you invite other powerful people to your big fundraiser gala. And then you really just make deals with them on how to screw more people out of more money. And then,
and then your obituary says philanthropist.
Yeah. And you trot some poor kid out and you give him a sandwich and pat him on the head. And then you rush him out of there. And then you guys all have some crazy Epstein sex party or whatever, and then it's philanthropy.
I didn't read the article, but I saw the headline. It was a mainstream, one like Esquire or something, mainstream article talking about Epstein's biggest client was Wexner, and I'm like, would it be called a client or would it be called? Wasn't he like kind of the manager of the whole thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Les Wexner is like.
I feel like it's turned it on its head.
Yeah, client is such a nice term for the billionaire in North America that funded the whole operation.
Yeah.
So
You know, every time I saw Victoria's Secret, I was like, I bet you whoever is behind this is just a real up and up, real straight shooter, real moral, ethical man created Victoria's Secret.
Yeah, I bet you the guy that created this doesn't have a secret runway in Ohio that people were flown up through starting back in the 90s with the Clintons. Anyway, that's what I thought when I would see the Victoria's Secret.
Yep.
I mean, when I was a teenager and Victoria's Secret first came out and the neighbor in my apartment complex got that thing, I was very happy for Victoria's Secret early on.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
But then you find out it's all part of some horrific, it's just yet another lie where another like, hey, this is sexy. And it's like, nope, it's evil.
That's one of those things when you find out it's combined with some sort of horrific sex trafficking. You're like, they didn't really go to much trouble to cover that up, did they?
No.
I feel like it was a bit on the nose.
I know. They're not even really trying to hide it. It's just like there's probably just like a sex trafficking mail-in card in the back that you could have of the magazine that you could have just like.
Yeah.
Well, who's got the funner story?
I mean, I will say, I'm pretty sure no one dies in mine, which is a rarity for us.
Well, I don't know that anyone directly dies in mine. It's more of a created a thing that's contributed to a lot of death, but it's not a direct, like there's no like.
Mine is probably longer. Should we go longer first or second?
Oh yeah, do yours first. First. Go longer.
All right. So this is one of these that actually came out recently, at least the full accounting of it. Whereas we often cover historical things that go back many years, this has been over the past 20 years, and ProPublica just put out a extensive expose revealing the utter catastrophe that is this fleet of ships the Navy has had built over the past 20 years, called I guess the correct way to pronounce it is the littoral combat ships, but in order to have a lot of fun with it, I call it the literal combat ships because it's spelled like literal or similar. And it's great to think that the literal combat ships for the Navy are not literally combat and they're barely literally ships.
I love it. I did a story for Political Vigilante about a specific ship called the USS Zumwalt. It's like a complete waste of money. It was basically like the F-35 of the Navy, but it sounds like yours is even better in terms of stealing money and scamming it for something that doesn't work.
This is kind of a whole project over 20 years that has wasted. I mean, I'll talk about how it's not wasting it for the rich because they get the money, but it's wasted $100 billion, which is not on the level of the 1 trillion of the F-35, but it's a shit ton of money.
It's so funny. Like the corruption is so out of whack that 100 billion is like not even the top of the list. It's like like.
Yeah. Normally this in any reasonable world, this would be like they did what? And instead it's like almost zero coverage. I mean, this is in ProPublica, but I wouldn't be surprised if CNN has like some tiny article in the back of their website so that they can say they covered it. But
of course, some like financial discrepancies over literal ships, and then right below it is just some like gastric bypass surgery click or something like that.
Yeah. It shows some gnarly toenail you're supposed to clip on. This is from ProPublica. In 2002, Admiral Vernon Clark stared down the deck of a Danish warship at a pier in Denmark and watched a demonstration that would shape the future of the U.S. Navy and shocked him. On the orders of the Danish Navy official, a crane hoisted off the pier and installed on the ship a giant weapons package. And within 40 minutes, sailors, a large gun deck, basically. And within 40 minutes, sailors were rotating the weapon to prepare it for operation. So this ship switched out its entire weaponry for a different kind of weaponry in roughly 40 minutes to an hour. No American ship could swap weapons on or off deck like that at all. And the Danes made reconfiguring a vessel to carry out different missions look easy. Clark, the head of the U.S. Navy at the time, marveled at the technology. And this, I looked up. So they got this idea from the Danes. I looked up what the Danish military budget is per year. Do you want to take a guess, Graham, on the military budget of Denmark? Now, keep in mind, our U.S. budget is roughly $1 trillion. It's over $1 trillion if you count black budgets.
I'm going to guess that the Danish budget is less than the money wasted on this dumb ship.
Yes, you are correct. You win by a lot.
Yay!
About $100 billion has been wasted on this complete catastrophe of a ship. It was supposed to be 50 ships. Now it's down to 35 ships. Denmark spends $3.9 billion a year on their entire military. We spent $100 billion on these catastrophic ships. And if you take the number of ships we ended up with and divide $100 billion by that, they roughly cost like over $3 billion a piece.
The Danish military budget, $3.9 billion, is only $800 million more than the LAPD's annual budget, which is $3.1 billion.
Right. So the entire military of Denmark is the same as the LAPD.
Same as the LAPD.
And yet, here we were looking at Denmark's abilities for their Navy and going, wow, I wish we could do something like that. So they came up with this idea for these naval ships, the literal combat ship, that would be small, relatively lightly armed, and operated by about 40 sailors. So far smaller than like a battleship or anything like that. And far smaller crew, everything. And the weapon systems would not be permanently installed, so they could be switched out. The new ships would be deployed on the coastal, which is what littoral means, waters, where the Navy needed to expand its presence around the world. Yeah, that's what we need, is more U.S. presence. I've often said that if the U.S. were just present in more places, we would have a much better world. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem that the United States military only occupies about 82% of the entire planet. It's just still, there's that, yeah.
And and it goes with that it's upsetting that the congressional research, so this is actually our own government, congressional research report found that we'd had roughly 400 military interventions and wars since the inception of the United States. And that's far more than countries, because we've done many countries multiple times.
It's like, it's on average of 2 a year. I mean, if our country is 200 and some years old, I mean, it's like.
Yeah. So in May of 2004, they awarded contracts to 2 teams of defense contractors to build up 2 prototypes. Both teams had lobbied heavily to win the contracts. Oh, so isn't that funny how this works? They lobby heavily, they get the contracts. You pay Congress, you get the contracts. One was Lockheed Martin. The other was General Dynamics, working with Australian shipbuilder Austal. They also decided they invested too much in protecting ships with extensive armor because, as one of the generals said, show me a ship that can take a direct hit from today's weaponry and survive. So why are we spending money to try? Basically, it was like, they're not going to survive anyway, so let's not protect this thing at all. The cost began to rise dramatically. The ships were originally supposed to cost no more than $220 million apiece. And now they're upwards of $500 million apiece. However, that doesn't count the entire cost of the program. That's the cost of building the ship. So really, per ship, it's about $3 billion they've spent on this. In 2015, in November, The USS Milwaukee, this is a great story, set out across the frigid waters of the Great Lakes for its maiden voyage. So this is one of the literal combat ships. The Navy planned to sail Milwaukee to the from its shipyard in Lake Michigan to San Diego. From there, it would eventually join its sister ship at Fort Worth. But the ship wouldn't need a fight to suffer its first defeat. Its worst enemy would be its own engine. On December 11th, about 3 weeks into the 2-month journey, 3 weeks into a 2-month journey, software failure severely damaged the Milwaukee's combining gear, which is a very important aspect of it. A salvage ship had to tow it 40 miles for repairs in Norfolk, Virginia. The ship hadn't made it halfway down the East Coast before breaking down. If the Milwaukee were a brand new car, this would be the equivalent of stalling out on its way out of the dealership.
I mean, I do. It does make sense that you would need a warship in Milwaukee because Wisconsin is under a constant threat of being invaded by Michigan. And I think that's
very true.
The shores of Wisconsin are literally a beachhead that the people of Michigan have been trying to invade, and Michigan keeps building up their army. So it's wise that there's warships in Wisconsin.
Absolutely. And Wisconsin's trying to defend itself with just cheese, and that's not easy.
It's not enough at all.
No, it's not enough.
And deer blinds.
They hide in deer blinds and then they throw cheers. Yeah. On January 5th, hundreds of gallons of fuel spilled into the ship's main machinery room. The sailors had to spray, and I have a little extra info on this part, had to spray chemical foam on the fuel to prevent it from catching fire. Then in grueling, filthy shifts, they took turns crawling into the tight compartment to clean up the chemical spray with rags and pumps. Now, here's something this article is not telling you. I would bet anyone $1,000 that every one of those sailors will get cancer in the coming years, in the coming 10 years. And it's because what does our military use to fight fires and spray all over the place? They use PFAS, P-F-A-S, which are the forever chemicals that are ending up everywhere around the world in all of our blood and air and everything else. And these soldiers that are like face to face with it, like in it, cleaning it up, they get the cancer first.
Yeah, that's why any young people out there, if you think that your military cares about you, they do not. So they don't care about you at all, and they'll put you on some bad ship and make you climb through cancer foam.
Yeah. And by the way, the military is aware of that these are forever chemicals that cause cancer. So that was another catastrophe. The ships were rushed to sea with faltering equipment, shorthanded crews, and captains without sufficient training or support tried to make them work. Breakdowns ensued. Then the pressure to perform and restore the reputation of the program intensified anew, and this cycle repeated itself. Contrary to what Clark observed in Denmark, the various weapons systems would not be easy to swap out. The Navy hadn't factored in the weeks it would take for all the contractors, sailors, and others who were needed to fly in from around the world to help outfit the vessels for different missions. Plus, there are two versions of the literal combat ship that do not connect at all. They can't share equipment. They can't share weapon systems. They can't even share crew because the crew are trained on a specific one, meaning you have to have all these specific types of people to operate any of this. So basically, these dumb little ships go out, they malfunction or break down, then they're brought to a port. Then the Navy flies people around the world who actually know how to fix them.
This sounds like the military's floating version of the Fry Festival.
The Fire Festival.
Fire Festival, right? Whatever. Just a disaster.
Yeah. No, that's actually a great analogy. The U.S. military is the Fire Festival, except no one goes to jail. And in fact, it just keeps running as if it's running well. Like people say this is great. This is wonderful. This is a wonderful. We have the best military in the world.
Yeah, it's like people coming back from the fire festival going, it was amazing, but there was no supermodels. You didn't get to stay. No, it was
No,
awesome.
no.
We stayed in dirty tents. It was great, and it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Dirty tents. We were given pieces of cheese on bread, and yeah.
Yeah. But apparently there's a new fire festival, and it's the same guy that he just got out of jail and he's back to start another one.
Yeah. And he's back to do it again. And our mainstream media is more than willing to keep giving him all the time in the world to promote his bullshit.
I want to start a festival that just takes place, in some dumb place, and I make a bunch of money and I lie to everybody and steal it, but it's legal.
Yeah. I think you could call him up. He might be looking for applicants. You could make the make the green smoothies at the fire festival.
Yeah, and they're $500 each.
So here are some lists of the problems with the literal combat ships who are not literally combat nor literally ships. They were supposed to help find and destroy underwater mines. That was one of their big things. But the remote mine hunting system often returned false alarms during testing, was unreliable, frequently broke down, and was difficult for sailors to control. The Navy turned to a new form of mine hunting technology, which is still under development. So basically, the Navy is now using, when they do use mine hunters, using like 25, 30-year-old mine hunters. Because of the emphasis on speed, these ships were originally built in part on designs used for commercial ferries. The designs did not contain protections that could prevent the flooding of critical systems when under attack, nor, it seems, the flooding of critical systems when not under attack, because a lot of them are flooding. Like, systems just fuck up even when they're just out in the water. Literal combat ships were supposed to be equipped to hunt and destroy submarines with an interlinked package of sonar devices, helicopters, and torpedoes. But the systems didn't effectively communicate with one another. The towed sonar couldn't function properly in the vessel's wake, and the Freedom class is considered too loud to hunt submarines. So the Navy has canceled the entire function in 2022. The Navy traced many high-profile breakdowns of the ships to a design flaw in what's known as the combining gear. The Freedom is also considered, and before I say this next part, let's remember that the U.S. military is the #1 global warming emissions organization in the world. They release more emissions of an organization than anything in the world. Now, there are companies and things that are worse, like ExxonMobil causes more damage than our military. But in terms of an actual organization, U.S. military is #1 for causing
#1, baby.
climate crisis.
Fucking face. In your face, #1. The #1 polluter in the world.
Can't even compete with it. Can't even get close.
Eat it.
And so that being said, the literal combat ships, which were smaller, so they shouldn't use as much gas, they're considered gas hogs because in order to go what's considered fast for a boat that size, they can't go very long without running out of fuel. So they're just constantly using tons of fuel, and then they have to they can't be far from refueling, which is also a bit of a problem for a Navy ship you want to actually have an impact with.
So let's see if we got this right. We need to go out and find mines, which it can't do. It can't go very far because it's gas guzzling, and it catches on fire.
Yeah.
Am I missing anything else of the fantastic?
It can't go far because it's got to refuel, but it also can't go far, period, because it tends to break down.
So even if you had more gas or a longer range, it still wouldn't work because it would just break down anyway.
Right. It's also meant to be able to change weapon systems very easily, which it can't do. So it doesn't do that. And it's meant to be super agile. Like you can use it for all kinds of things. And in fact, there's 12 guys who know how to operate it. So you have to fly them around the world to try and get anything to work.
So this thing is by design not able to do any of the things that it says it can do by design.
Yes. And so I think what we're getting at is, why would the military, over the span of 20 years, more than 20 years, spend $100 billion on something that has never worked well, has never done the things it can do, and just seems like a giant waste of money? Could it be that our entire military system is mostly, with a couple exceptions, but mostly a giant money laundering scheme? They take taxpayer money, they filter it through the military, which no one ever votes against, and everyone wants to give more money to, 55% of discretionary funding or whatever it is. They take all that money, $1 trillion a year, and they filter it through the military, and they give it back to weapons contractors and the richest people in America, which are mostly the richest people in the world.
I don't know what your problem is with the free market economy, Lee. What's wrong? Why do you hate
and so that this thing that is viewed by any rational mind as the biggest disaster in the world. By the way, the Navy now doesn't want these ships. They're like trying to find something to do with it. Like they just like leave them in ports, and they were supposed to order. They initially ordered 50, and now they're down to 32, but then some senator forced them to take 3 more. So they're at like 35.
So now they're just like literally like leaving them in ports and turning them into like Airbnbs, like stay in this kitschy, fun,
Yeah. So they don't want them. But the thing is, to any rational mind, that's a catastrophe. That's how did this go wrong? But to the rich getting richer through all this, that's not a catastrophe. That sounds fine. We took $100 billion and put it in our pockets. So it's a big success. And I want to answer one comment from the comment thread. Someone asked, isn't animal agriculture the number one cause of climate change? I didn't say the number one cause. I said the number one organization. Animal agriculture is not an organization. It is an entire industry. So yes, animal agriculture is worse, but military as an organization.
As far as the United States military as an organization is the number one organization that pollutes the earth is the U.S. military.
Yeah.
And thank you, Monica Cazal, for the super chat. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Top Navy leaders repeatedly dismissed or ignored warnings of the ship's flaws. One Navy secretary and his allies in Congress fought to build more ships even as they broke down at sea and their weapons systems failed. Staunch advocates in the Navy circumvented checks meant to ensure that ships that cost billions can do what they're supposed to do. Contractors who stood to profit spent millions lobbying Congress. Scores of frustrated sailors recall spending more time fixing the ship than sailing them. And the other problem with this, so part of it is that they're enriching themselves by doing this. So most of them don't care, just spend more money. This is the reason there's, 2,000 Abrams tanks sitting in the middle of the California desert, completely untouched, because they just keep making them because that makes money for the contractors, even if they don't need Abrams tanks. But so there's that aspect of it. But the other aspect is that our military, much like a lot of organizations, everyone's afraid to be the person who says, stop this big project, or stand up to the people above them. They're all the people that are even remotely in the higher echelon are trying just to keep their job and move up the ranks. So standing up to the entire military industrial complex and saying, that $100 billion ship program, we need to stop it, is terrible for your career. So no one does it.
It's, first of all, you're probably not going to get reelected because you're going to be called you hate Americans' freedoms and you love terrorism or whatever. Not to mention, think of the politician, how much money you make on this. Some lobbyist comes to you and says, hey, will you vote? And you go, yeah. Does the ship work? Well, we're working that out. Okay, just keep the checks coming. Just keep my super PAC nice and filled up. Give me whatever. Like, Congress is such a scam. Once you get in it, it's such a great racket. I mean, you're the biggest they're the biggest money laundering, grifter, con artists, insider traders like we have working today. Like Bernie Madoff is like a poor carbon copy of a criminal compared to what the people in the House and the Senate are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so at every level, I mean, you're talking about Congress, but even just in the military, it's like it's beneficial to you to let these things keep going, to keep your head down. And then you have the lower level soldiers or, naval officers who they don't know the entirety of the program, and they're just doing their best. They're like, some of them are spend years training on how to operate these ships. Literally years, literally years learning how to operate these ships, like playing the I call them video games. They call them whatever, digital representations of the ship, all that shit. And it's all to operate a ship that we're never really going to use.
Ever.
And they are wasting their lives and their efforts and their minds and everything else to learn how to operate a ship that is just garbage, just utter bullshit.
And it's the same. I mean, we say the same thing every time, but it's because it needs to be said. It's so maddening then to hear like, how are we going to pay for student debt forgiveness?
Yeah,
how are we going to pay for Medicare for all? How are we going to pay for this? You liberals just want everything for free. Well, yeah, because you've been literally setting money on fire. With these
and on top of that, how are we going to pay for those things? It was in the New York Times. There was a study a few years ago on how much it would cost to end world hunger per year. And they came up with roughly $30 billion. So this naval program could have ended world hunger for over 3 years. And of course, then you greatly benefit all the lives of those people, and they end up in a far better place because they weren't starving for those 3 years. They also found that giving the world clean water would cost roughly $10 billion. And of course, clean water is one of the number one causes of death of people around the world, dirty water. And so you could save all those lives, fucking change humanity for the better. And with this, just the cost of this naval program, $100 billion of these catastrophic ships, they could have given everyone around the world clean water for 10 years.
Unreal.
This is the last thing I'll add here is here's some other examples they give of the catastrophic nature of our military industrial complex. They say hundreds of billions of dollars of misspent taxpayer money has been spent on projects from nearly every branch of the military. The F-35 fighter jet deployed by the Navy, Marines, and Air Force is more than a decade late and $183 billion over budget, now costing around $1 trillion. The Navy's newest aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, cost $13 billion and has yet to prove it can reliably launch planes, which seems to be like the number one thing an aircraft carrier does.
And number one, float. Number two, launch planes.
Close second. And the Army's future combat system was largely abandoned in 2009 after the military had dedicated more than $200 billion on a battlefield intelligence network meant to link troops, tanks, and robots. And this, they have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. And we're not even talking about the $21 trillion of unaccounted for financial adjustments in the Pentagon's books. They just failed their fifth audit, quote unquote, fail, where they don't tell us where their money's going. They said in that fifth failure that they can't account for 55% of all of their assets. They don't know where 55% of everything is that the Pentagon owns. I mean, it's pure insanity.
Well, here's a super chat brings us by Rhymser. My bro works for a weapons contractor. He says he doesn't care who the U.S. is at war with, as long as we're at war and had government overtime and his family is cared for, nothing else matters. Wow.
Yep. It sounds like people working most jobs in America.
Yeah. Don't care.
Yeah.
Don't care. Well, that's fantastically. It gives me hope that our military is spending money on our freedoms.
Man, if I could just get the money that they spend on a trash can, I would be living pretty. They had in one of their latest records of spending, they spend $51,000 per trash can for a special trash can on the F-35. $51,000 for a trash
Wow.
can.
The average American salary is about $49,000
Yeah, a year.
a year.
A year.
Wow. Well, thank you, Emilio Goodstar. On the bright side, those ships' designers are the greatest pacifists of our generation.
Yeah,
There you
totally.
go.
If all of the U.S. military systems don't work. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Thank you. Oh, that's hilarious. All right. Well, that was a fantastic. I guess yeah, we should applaud these designers that they keep making more ships that don't work. we should.
It's kind of like everyone's so upset that Mitch McConnell goes into freeze mode and can't speak anymore. During those moments is when I support Mitch McConnell. Like, he's not doing anything. That is the best thing that could ever happen. When he freezes, when Biden can't say a sentence, these are the best case scenarios.
When Dianne Feinstein doesn't know where she is, this
Yes.
is when I'm like, wow, that's when they're actually helping the country.
Yeah, that's when they're frozen, which is the same reason I'm the campaign manager for a rock I found in my yard for president. Because if the president were doing nothing, this world would be so much better off.
Yes, just do nothing. Just let them watch, Golden Girls and eat pudding, and then everything would be much better.
Yep.
All right, well, let's go down to now segment number 2. Speaking of money being wasted, Lee, I want to talk to you about the Federal Reserve, which is neither a reserve nor federal.
Boy, it's kind of like the literal combat ship.
Yeah, it's literally, that's our theme today, is just the name of it is incorrect. It's a deliberate lie, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the first of all, this is really a federal banking cover-up, if you want to talk about what the Federal Reserve is. The Federal Reserve is neither truly federal nor a Federal Reserve. It's not owned or directly controlled by the United States government. The fact that the words United States Federal Reserve System are printed on every U.S. banknote thus raises serious questions. So it was started in roughly 1910. Let me go where that is. This is my favorite part about it. Let me go actually here. I'm going off of two articles. There were several attempts at a centralized bank in the United States, right? First in the First Bank of the United States from 1791 to 1811. We talked about how that was our first government scam, Ponzi scheme thing. Then the Second Bank of the United States was from 1816 to 1836. Each had 20-year charters, and they both issued currency and made commercial loans. The banks were opposed by many who thought they were engines of corruption that supported the business class over the needs of the common man. That's shocking that was happening in America.
Wait, the bankers making the big bank so they could do their banking, you're saying we're angling it towards the bankers instead of the average people?
Yeah. So basically, I'm
gonna declare that unacceptable.
It's totally unacceptable. So basically, the current Federal Reserve System, which has been around for over 100 years, is the result of 2 attempts to have a corrupt banking cartel that failed. And then they decided, well, how do we create one that can't be? Because Andrew Jackson came in.
What do you mean by failed? You mean that like the people stood up against it, or you mean it just they just couldn't find enough corrupt people?
They couldn't find enough corruption, and they had 20-year charters. And then like the second one, Andrew Jackson vetoed legislation to renew the Second Bank of the United States, starting a period of free banking in 1863 as a means to help finance the Civil War. So,
and your article might not have this, but also even through the Civil War, different areas still had different banknotes, I think.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So what happened after the seventh one? So they had to get these 20, the first two ones had to get these 20-year charters that were approved by the president. So they went, how do we eliminate these pesky politicians that are elected by citizens? How do we get them out of the way? That was their conundrum, Lee Camp.
How do we not have democracy? Yeah.
So then what they did was there were, that some people theorize were created bank panics in 1873, 1893, and 1907. This provided the backdrop for the renewed calls for the creation of a centralized banking system. So these rich guys created these bank panics, these financial crises, and then we need a more centralized bank, which is sold to the American people like, oh, the Federal Reserve, which again, it's not part of the federal government at all. In 1907, Congress created the National Monetary Commission to draft a plan for reform of the banking system. Senate Republican leader and financial expert Nelson Aldrich headed the commission. Aldrich set up two commissions, one to study the American monetary system in depth, and the other, headed by Aldrich himself, to study the European central banking systems and report on them. So centralized banking was met with opposition from politicians who were suspicious of a central bank and who charged that Aldrich was biased due to his close ties to wealthy bankers, such as he was friends with J.P. Morgan, and his daughter was married to John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah, so you don't think this is all one big club?
Mm-hmm. Why would you say that, Lee? Why would you say that? What happened then? Because and when Aldrich was accused of, hey, this is not good for us, what did Aldrich do? He said, you're right, and disbanded everything. Oh no, wait, I read that wrong. Aldrich said he decided that in 1910, Aldrich and executives representing the banks of J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Kuhn, Laban Co. secluded themselves for 10 days at a place called, no joke, Jekyll Island, Georgia.
Nice.
And the executives included Frank Vandercliff, president of the National Bank of New York, associated with the Rockefellers, Henry Davidson, senior partner of J.P. Morgan, Charles D. Norton, president of the First National Bank of New York, and Colonel Edward House, who would later become President Woodrow Wilson's closest advisor and founder of the Council on Foreign Relations. There, Paul Warburg of Kuhn, Lieb & Co. directed the proceedings and wrote the primary features of the Federal Reserve Act. Warburg would later write that the matter of a uniform discount rate, interest rate, and discussed and settled at Jekyll Island. Vandercliff wrote in his 1935 autobiography, From Farm Boy to Financier. This is his own words, one of the guys that was there on Jekyll Island. I was as secretive, indeed I was as furtive as any conspirator. Discovery we knew simply must not happen, or else all our time and effort would have been wasted. If it were to be exposed that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatsoever of passing by Congress.
Right. You can't, if you're gonna get a banking bill through Congress, it can't be written by the largest bankers in the world. No.
On a secret island in Georgia. I do not feel it is any exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Island as the occasion of actual conception of what actually became the Federal Reserve System. It remained a secret to both the public and the government until journalist Bertie Charles Forbes wrote about it in 1916, 3 years after the Federal Reserve Act was passed. So they went and got together in Jekyll Island in 1910. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913. What they fought for was a private bank with little government influence, but concluded that the government should be represented on the board of directors.
Yeah. The government should be allowed to sit in the corner of the room.
So what this means is the let me go back to this other issue. Through the board of governors, this is basically the only place where the United States government has any say. They can appoint, the president can appoint the chair of the Federal Reserve. That's it. But the federal government, the president, Congress, Senate has no say on what they do behind closed doors at all. None.
Right. So it's talked about as if it's this important aspect of the U.S. federal government, and that's kind of how we hear about it in the mainstream media. And the only thing that is connected to the U.S. federal government is that the president appoints the president of the Federal Reserve.
Yes, that's it.
And then they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Whatever they want. Though Federal Reserve board members are appointed by U.S. President and confirmed by the Senate, the Federal Reserve is a privately owned institution controlled mainly by large private banks. Once board members are appointed, the U.S. government has no control over their decisions other than the president's ability to remove a board member.
Yeah, and this is an important point, that it's made up of private entities. And I remember arguing this with someone that was very informed on most politics. And he thought I was an idiot because I said it's made up of private entities that make billions off of merely printing, so-called printing. We don't really print it anymore, but printing our money. They make billions of dollars simply by being the ones that print the money. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he was like, no, it just goes back to the federal government. But you can look it up even on Wikipedia. Even the liberal source of all knowledge will tell you that the Federal Reserve, the private entities that make up the Federal Reserve, make billions of dollars a year. So it says like in 2020, they made $88.6 billion, and then they transferred. In 2015, the Federal Reserve earned a net income of $100 billion and transferred 97.7 to the U.S. Treasury, meaning they walked away with $3.3 billion or $2.3 billion just for printing the money, just to say to the U.S. government, you have whatever money you want.
Well, that's the VIG. That's the juice that they get.
That's the juice. I got to get myself a little cut. Yeah.
Little taste. And I'm not greedy. I just got to wet my beak a little bit.
It's just $2 billion of little taste. Yeah.
That's all. I just got wet my beak. I'm not greedy, Lee. I'm not Lee. It's 2 points.
And that's not even accounting for all the money they make by simply having the controls of the Federal Reserve. All the fucking insider trading and all that shit that they do. Like, that's not even counting that. That's just straight up cash on hand.
Yeah. That's just walking around money, Lee. You know what I mean? That's a little, you know what I mean? That's just a little like weekend, you know what I mean? Little flash cash.
Walking around money. Yeah. They keep that $2.5 billion in a little roll and with a rubber band around it.
Yeah, a rubber band. They just peel out. I just go, what do you need? What do you need? And they just peel off. Well, get yourself something nice, Lee Camp.
Let me lick my thumb here.
There we go, Lee. There you go, kiddo. You get yourself all dialed up, Lee. You know what I mean? Take your lady out to something nice. You know what I mean? Get her something pretty. So, also, this is the other great thing. A study of the history and functions of the Federal Reserve reveals that the powerful bankers such as J.P. Morgan have had inordinate power and control over the formation and management of the monetary policy of the United States through their power over the Fed. Congress has virtually no influence over this incredibly powerful institution. Neither does the Fed have reserves to back all the credit it issues. This sounds fun. None of the money in circulation is backed by anything of real value, such as gold or silver. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. Yep. The Fed, like most banks, at any one time only has 3 to 10% of all credit issued held in reserves as banknotes. So, which means that if they're giving out whatever, $1 trillion, they only have 10% of that, which is $100 billion. They don't have.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario is 10%. But more than likely it's between 3 and 10%.
Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve is.
I was just going to say, and so the natural question would be, if our money's not backed by anything, if it's just backed by the faith and credit of the U.S. government, why can we print so much money? Like they increased the monetary supply by 20% just during the pandemic. So how can we print so much money and not have, I know we have inflation, but not have out of control, crazy inflation? And the answer is the petrodollar system, and the dollar being the world reserve currency, which means that we need fossil fuels to A, keep being pumped, and B, keep being sold in dollars in order to have this ridiculous system keep going.
Yes, that is built on sand. And therefore...
But there's oil under the sand, though.
So this goes back to how the Federal Reserve is nearly federal. It's not federal, nor is it a reserve. Where was it created? So Nobel economist Milton Friedman said he prefers to abolish the Federal Reserve System altogether. Bernie Bernanke, former chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, stated, "I would like to say to Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz regarding the Great Depression, you're right, we did it. We're sorry, but thanks to you, we won't do it again."
Nice.
Really nice. So these guys help create these things. Another aspect of the banking about which most people little nothing about is the fractional reserve system, which I was just talking about. This is how, and because the Federal Reserve does this is how the regular banks basically make money out of thin air. Every dollar in your checking or savings account, the bank can legally lend out $10 or more, which is a 10-to-1 ratio. That's what they legally can do. But one of the things that created the 2008 banking crisis was they were doing, for every dollar you had in there, they do 20 or 50 or 100, which is how, but legally they're allowed to do 10%. Yeah. Legally. Yeah. So that's how there's money is created out of thin air. And that's why one of the things that creates a recession, like right now, the interest rates are high. So people are not lending money. So there's not all this extra money in the economy, which is literally money that's printed out of thin air.
Well, and there's a moment in, I just rewatched The Big Short the other day by Adam McKay, and there's a moment in it where, you know, without getting into why everything collapsed, which is a whole episode of its own, but there's a moment in it where one of them realizes, maybe Steve Carell realizes, that it's not just that all these people have these subprime mortgages that they can't pay and that people are then betting on whether those get paid, but there was hedging off of hedging off of hedging. So you have like 100 times the amount of money is being bet on what is going on down the line, which is similar to, there's some similarities to fractional reserve. And so if that thing at the beginning, the mortgages, collapses, it's not just that, it's the hedging on the hedging on the hedging. So you have just 100 times the amount of money that was actually in the mortgages. It just fucking goes up in smoke, which is what caused, you know, why we ended up in such a catastrophe there. But it really is just such a Ponzi scheme. I mean, it really is a house of cards.
You're doing fractional banking, which is putting money out of thin air. And then what you're talking about is you're gambling on money coming out of thin air.
Yeah, and then there's people gambling on the initial gamblers, and then there's people
Right.
gambling on those gamblers. You know, will that guy betting on the thing get his bet to, you know, win his bet? It's just spirals out of control.
It's insane. Um, so this is a description of fractional reserve banking origins from a Standard University macroeconomics text. When the ancients began to use gold in making transactions, it became apparent that it was both unsafe and inconvenient for consumers and merchants to carry gold and have it weighed and assessed for purity every time a transaction was negotiated. It therefore became commonplace to deposit one's gold with goldsmiths whose vaults or strong rooms could be used upon for a fee. Upon receiving a gold deposit, the goldsmith issued a receipt for the depositor. Soon, goods were traded with the goldsmith's receipts, and the receipts became the first kind of paper money, right? That's how that first happened. At this point, the goldsmiths, embryonic bankers, used a 100% reserve system. Their circulating paper money receipts were fully backed by gold, meaning dollar for dollar, the amount of paper notes out there were the exact amount of gold that they had in their reserves. So there was no fractional reserve banking, right? Then somewhere in there, a banker hit the idea that paper money could be issued in excess of the gold held. Goldsmiths then began to issue additional receipts into circulation by making interest-earning loans in the form of gold receipts. This is the beginning of fractional banking.
And this is also, so fractional banking is also part of the reason that anytime a bank goes under or something bad happens in the financial markets, our mainstream media falls all over themselves to say, don't worry, your money is fine in your bank. Everyone just chill out. And the reason is because if everyone were to ask for their money, the banks don't have it. There's no way they can give it to everyone. It would just, the whole thing would collapse very quickly. You know, 1/10 of bank users go and ask for their money and it's over. And so they have to say, don't take your money out. It's fine. But then beyond that, they insure you up to $250,000. Beyond that, they don't insure you. So you could just, the bank could just say, we don't have it. And that's the end of it. And then you could end up in situations like in Greece ended up a few years ago where they just told people you can't withdraw money anymore. Like, it's just fucking crazy.
About 2 years ago, when I started seeing the writing on the wall for this happening during the pandemic, I remember doing a video telling my audience, I say, the minute you hear politicians and or the media saying your money is fine, pull your money out. And Biden said that this March after those First Republic Bank and SVP went under and the government bailed them out. Your money's fine. The minute I was like, oh my goodness. So this keeps happening.
You pull it out and you invest it all in government secret mugs. Okay.
Yes.
We have mugs available. And if you were to put it all in our mugs, our coffee mugs, then your money's safe. Like, no one can take those mugs from you.
No, your money's safe in a government secret mug available at patreon.com/government secrets. So, and I urge everybody to listen, who's listening or watching the show, do even more research because this is, I mean, I'm really scratching the surface on what the Federal Reserve. I just wanted to give like an overview of how it's a complete secret. It's a complete not what it is.
Graham, they should not do more research. We have all of the information and we have just given it to them.
So, but
uh-oh, we lost him. I've noticed Graham's shit always craps out in the last 3 minutes of the episode is when Graham disappears. Oh, wait. It's you've got to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? We can't hear you. Oh. Oh, maybe he chose to mute himself. It looks like he's on the phone. All right. Sorry. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I think we're wrapping this up. We were basically at the end. We're headed over to Patreon. Hey. Hello?
Hey, sorry.
Hey. Sorry. Did you get a phone call?
Yeah, I did. I'm this is very critical for my lease, and it was from the leasing office.
Got it. Oh, I thought you'd been dropped out, and then I'm like, oh wait, I can add him back on. So I fucked it up, but don't worry, we couldn't hear you though.
Yeah, I muted everything. I was just like, there's a whole apartment thing, and it was taking forever, and they finally got so boom.
Okay, I was completely baffled. All right, but we are headed over to. I think are we wrapping up? Are we headed over to Patreon?
Yes, this has been episode 134 with Lee Camp and Graham Hellwood, and we will see you over at patreon.com/government secrets.
Yes, we are. One of the things we're going to talk about is the September 11th, 1973, when Salvador Allende was suicided by the United States and others. There may have been others, but
it's a good old CIA coup that happened.
We're going to talk about that and more at patreon.com/government secrets. So join us over there. All my stuff is at leecamp.locals.com if you want to support my community. Also, my show is at rumble.com/leecamp, free to watch over there. So.
Yes, go to grahamhellwood.com, sign up for my newsletter. We're going to be doing more live shows. We did more Band in Florida shows right now, but sign up for the newsletter. You can buy Political Vigilante merch. And of course, super chats are back. I'm going live 3-4 days a week, and I'll be live again from the picket line probably next week. So check that out.
All right. See you on Patreon. Later, folks.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.